All right, on this episode of the NBA Big Board Podcast, I myself, James Barlowe, and my friend Leif Thulin, we're going to talk about some of the green room snubs. Stay tuned. Hey again, thanks for making Locked On NBA Big Board your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit fanduel.com/locked on to get started. So, without further ado, the NBA, they released their 25 green room invites. 24 players did accept. The one who did not accept his green room invitation was Zach Edey. Just in case you are unaware, I'll just quickly read off the names. Again, some of these are no surprises, but 24 guys. Take a deep breath here, Lee. Zachary Ricochet, Alex Sarr, Donovan Clingan, Reed Shepard, Modest Buzelis, Stefan Castle, Dalton Connect, Tijan Salon, Ron Holland, Cody Williams, Devin Carter, Jacoby Walter, Rob Dilling, Nikola Topic, Jared McCain, Johnny Furphy, Keyshawn George, Kyle Filipowski, Isaiah Collier, Svi Missy, Tristan Da Silva, Khalil Ware, Deron Holmes, and last but not least, Bub Carrington or Carlton Carrington, if you were not going to call him by his nickname. All right, so with that list of guys, again, 25 were invited, 24 accepted. This is basically what people think the first round will look like. Maybe somebody from this list of guys slips to the second round. That remains to be seen. So, but what we're going to talk about, and again, if this is your first time listening, you can check back in the archives. We have talked about guys who were invited to the green room. But today, myself and Leif, we're going to talk about some of the guys that we think that maybe should have been invited. Now, again, 25 guys, everybody can't go, like my man Benny the Butcher said, but there are some, I feel like, at least one or two glaring omissions. I want to first start off with Tyler Smith from the G League in Ignite. I personally don't know how he didn't get invited. I can make an argument that he could replace. I'm going to say who I think he probably should have been replaced, but Tyler was very productive on a team full of 18 and 19-year-olds in a grown man league. He shot 36% from three. He did have 44 blocks, 39 steals, and 58 dunks. His synergy numbers show from the catch, he shot 38% on catch and shoot shots. He shot 49% unguarded. He shot 36% on dribble jumpers, and he shot 64% at the rim. 6'11" power forward. What he does translates, pick and pop, and he can roll. I don't know why a lot of people are dropping him. I've heard, and I talked with Rich before. Rich and maybe others think that he is a defensive liability. But my thinking is a team full of 18 and 19-year-olds playing against grown men. I mean, one night you might play against Lance Stevenson. Like Lance is like 31, 32. It's just I don't get it. It's hard to win college basketball games with all 18 and 19-year-olds. Now we're talking about the G League trying to win with 18 and 19-year-olds. So does he have his defensive deficiencies? Sure, but I don't see how he's left off this green room invite. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's a guy that I've had pretty consistently about 14 through 17. I've kind of fluctuated in between that little range. I wouldn't like if the right team were picking at 14, I would take him there because one, he's enormous. I saw him in person. The guy's no like usual 6'9" slender guy. His shoulders are enormous. He shoots it well. There's a soft touch. He's lefty. he ran pretty quickly. Like, for those who say he's got deficiencies defensively, often you look for just quickness and agility. Agility was okay, but the quickness was really impressive for someone who's as large as he is. So he's definitely an omission for me, and I think he's the most glaring one in terms of like national, like who you're looking for and what are the names that have been promoted all year long. He's the one that's the biggest omission. Obviously, for those of you who listen to this often, I care about Baylor Shireman because I think he's going to be a top 20 pick, and him not getting a green room invite doesn't shock me. But I do think, as I've said in a few episodes, I think he will be a top 20 pick nonetheless. This is what most people project. This is what the people who fill out surveys say is going to be the top 24 players. But I don't know if that's going to be indicative of what actually transpires. So I think those are the two biggest misses. Tyler Smith is the one that I think is the biggest national name that's been there in the prominent. He played on a team with Ron Holland and Montas Buzelis, who've been talked about as the number one potential pick. So everyone's seen him, and he was the one who impressed the most early on in the year. And now to be out of the top 24, according to whatever poll by NBA front office employees, that's shocking, more so than Shireman, who's made this late surge, even though I think they're very similar prospects. That's the one that's the big shocker, is Tyler Smith.
Yeah, and then like some of the other guys, we'll talk about them, in other segments. But like you said, Tyler is the biggest like shocker. I'm higher on Jaylen Tyson, right? Terrence Shannon Jr. He had his off the court issues, which he's been exonerated of. Jurisic kind of made a late surge. Pome I think he probably could have got one too, but you would be like, okay, I understand, but like I just don't see like what people aren't seeing in Tyler. He can pop, he can roll, he finishes with both hands, he's athletic, he shot the ball extremely well, and he played on a extremely young team that was not probably set up in the best position to win. And it's like I think we're overthinking it. If you take him, like you mentioned, between 14 and 17, I think somebody's going to get like a really, really young player, a really good player who has upside. And like, we in a draft full of guys who are like, man, if he could only shoot, like we know at 6'8", 6'9", or excuse me, like 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", that we know he can shoot. And I don't get it, but sometimes somebody falls, but ultimately when you look back at it in 4 or 5 years, that's where you want to look and say, okay, that's how you evaluate a draft, because what we are talking about now only matters because we're talking about it right now. Nobody's played. So I feel like Tyler is just very underappreciated. But like you said with Baylor Shireman, you can argue he's the second best 23-year-old or older classman in this draft. Again, he shot the ball well with that Boston workout. We know he's going to shoot the ball well. Him not getting a green room invitation doesn't really surprise me, but if we're talking about on paper, I think he has as much of an argument as maybe even a Tristan Da Silva, who did get a green room argument. You're higher on Shireman than Da Silva, correct?
Yes, I am. I like Tristan Da Silva. The reason I prefer Shireman is I think he's probably a slightly better shooter. And that's up to interpretation, but I think he took harder shots than Da Silva to get the percentage he earned. And I think he's a better rebounder than Da Silva, despite being shorter. And they're both very intangible players, make the right plays. Shireman puts the ball on the floor better to pass than Da Silva. Da Silva might be a better cutter. But if you're to add those up, that would be a slight advantage Shireman to me. But I do like both players.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so what we're going to do here, we are going to take a break, and we come back, we're going to talk about Pacome Dadier and Nikola Jurisic. But first, let me tell you all about eBay Motors. So, eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Before we get into the next segment, let me ask you something. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Sports Network. Your team every day. Before we took a quick break, we had mentioned that in this next segment, we're going to talk about potential guys who may have been snubbed. And then I created this list. I came with Leif with the idea. For one, because somebody's going to get snubbed. That's just the way it is. But, I just feel like there's one player in particular who didn't have a stronger argument than the guys that we had mentioned. And I'll probably mention him in the third segment. But before we get there, I guess because, Kendrick Lamar is doing his concert and it's okay to hate, I'm not going to start my hating campaign yet. But Pome, I feel like is a first round talent. And I think you can make the argument that he could have been a green room invite. I like him a lot. Like I said, I think he can handle the ball. I think his handle is improving, or I should say he's been able to handle the ball, but now he's becoming more confident handling the ball. When I first started watching him, I thought it was like, he's a power forward that can shoot a little bit. But excuse me, he's now looking like a small forward, a wing. I think he plays pretty well off the ball. His jump shot looks great. He makes jump shots. I really like him. I think he may have the potential to sneak into the top 20, especially the way that these cards are falling. He kind of screams like a Toronto Raptor to me, is as far as like him being able to do more than just catch and shoot. I think he will have in a few years the confidence, because he does have the ability to put the ball on the ground and maybe be a pick and roll operator. So I really like him. What are your thoughts on Pome?
He's a player that I think likely goes 20 to 27-ish, some team that can afford a long-term development piece as opposed to maybe an immediate impact guy. We've talked about the new apron kind of creating roster spots for older players who are more easily able to step into roles and knock down open shots, defend at a decent level. Like the poster child of this for me was Christian Braun. Obviously, Jaime Jaquez gets a little bit more notoriety, but in that 20 to 30 range, Christian Braun came in and impacted Nuggets on a championship team, then played a bigger role the next year because they pay Jokic, Porter Jr., Murray, all these guys a lot of money. You need to get players on cheap contracts that are ready to play. The reason I bring that up about Pome is I think there are only a few teams in those spaces that can afford to have a bit of a project. And I don't think he's necessarily a project in a negative term. I just don't think he's as ready set and a skill set to be a supplementary piece as hey, here's your fifth option offensively, and he's going to be solid on the defensive end. There aren't that many teams set up for him in that range. So I think there's going to be a lot, kind of a scarcity. Maybe some teams are going to be scared, but then again, there's going to be some team that really loves him, and they're like, man, we could get a guy who can be really good soon. And so that's where kind of two different philosophies are going to battle one another, and some teams are going to come away with a guy with a lot of potential, and other teams are going to decide, you know what, we can compete shortly. Let's prolong our window by getting a safer player. And some are going to say, well, we have those pieces in place. Let's prolong our window by getting a really good player that in 2 or 3 years can actually be a major contributor as opposed to a sixth or seventh man. So I think it depends on the philosophy of the teams drafting down there. I do think his talent warrants green room invitation.
So that's a perfect segue. So you're saying if a team is like, you know what, we need somebody who could probably contribute a little earlier. What are your thoughts on Nikola Jurisic being that kind of player?
I like him. I've had him in my first round most of the year. He's someone that he shoots the ball well, he passes well, and he's 6'8". how many players in the draft actually fit those parameters? I know it's really simple and rudimentary, but sometimes that's all it is. He shoots the ball well, he passes the ball well, and he's 6'8", and he's not a bad athlete either. So I think people are overthinking him. I would have been surprised had he gotten a green room invite. I'll put it that way. But I wouldn't be surprised if he warrants top 20 consideration from teams drafting at the tail end of that, just because of those traits. Shoots well, passes well, 6'8", not a bad athlete.
All right, so Leif, you are the GM of the Utah Jazz. You got your draft hat on right now. 29th pick. Do you take Pome or do you take Nikola Jurisic? If either of them is available. I'm putting you on the spot. That's what I do.
Okay. I think it depends a little bit on what the Jazz do at 10.
What do you do at 10? Let's go. Come on.
Cody Williams or Ron Holland. Let's just say one of those two wings.
Okay.
Now, if those guys are ball in hand a little more, I lean Jurisic because I feel like they fit some of the, hey, this guy's going to hit open shots mold at a higher level sooner. But part of me, and James and I often think similarly about this in terms of drafting for potential. Part of me would like to swing for the fences on both picks and just hope you end up like, that's why I kept saying I wanted Gigi Jackson in the top 15 all of last year. Even the bad workouts, I was like, dude, if he were in the next draft, meaning this one, he was going to be a number 1 pick, number 3 pick, like easily. And so why did he fall to 46? Because people were scared. So I don't necessarily think Jurisic is a scared pick, but there would be a more cautious pick than picking Dadier. And so either you double up. I just don't think they would double up on potential. I think Jurisic would be seen as more safe than Dadier if they went for maybe a swing in Holland. That's about spades to me. Like I'd be pretty happy with either of them. I have them both ranked very similarly, about 24, 25 each.
All right, Leif, I got another one for you. Put you on the spot again. How big is the gap between Cody Williams and Pome Dadier?
Well, Cody is just more of a known quantity in terms of what, and I think he's unknown in some manners in terms of what is his best role going forward. What was his best role at Colorado? But you saw him play all the different roles. Whereas Dadier, you saw kind of shoveled into like, this guy's a good athlete. Here's a glimpse of the other things. Whereas Cody Williams was giving full games, full kind of 2-3 games in a row, bite size, like, hey, I'm the playmaker. Now I'm the top defender. Now I'm a shooter. Now I'm the pick and roll ball handler. Now I'm the isolation guy. I just know more about Cody Williams, and that's why I have more confidence than I do about Dadier.
Interesting. You know, I like to stir the pot. So it was just a quick thought because, you know, I'm really high on Pome, but like you said, it's really sometimes it's hard to project guys who play a really, really small role or how that translates to the NBA. And maybe that's kind of why maybe some of these international, I mean, obviously the money is great, right? The NIL money, but as an international prospect, you can look at it two ways. And I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but like Traore next year is probably going to stay in France, right? His buzz is strong enough for him to stay there.
Good.
He's really good. Like it's funny. I watched him at Basketball Without Borders in Indianapolis. I was like, he's all right. Like, you know, maybe one day he'll make it. And then he just like turned it up an entire notch since. And he basically like dominated the Nike Global Games. But his buzz is strong enough to bring this back. His buzz is strong enough for him to stay over in France and do his thing. But then you got other guys who are coming over here now. The kid that just went to BYU, Igor Demin, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Is he like, okay, I don't have Traore's buzz, but if I come over to the States, I'm going to get paid very well. And now I am a plane ride away, a day's trip away from NBA scouts. He's going to be BYU, right? So Provo is not very far from Salt Lake, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
my Google Map
about 40 minutes. Oh,
yeah, that's light, man. It takes 40 minutes to get out anywhere in Dallas. So like now, if I catch a Jazz game, I can stay for a BYU game. Or now because they're playing in the Big 12, I can catch a Rockets game because BYU is playing Houston. So it's just interesting how the philosophy is going to probably change or could change for some of these international guys because if I look at it just from a talent perspective of who does what, how who does what well, I don't necessarily think there's a huge gap between Cody Williams and Pacone, but we just see Cody Williams more.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to see how these French guys, just international guys in general, handle the draft process in the next couple years, especially with the NIL money. So we have a third segment coming up, but before I get to that, let me tell you about FanDuel. So summertime means baseball and the WNBA, excuse me, and now you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200. You can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP. Okay, you missed out on that one. I wonder if you picked Jaylen Brown, but you continue to use it on baseball. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So in this third and final segment, we're going to mention two guys that we've talked about before. If it's your first time listening, I feel like at least the chairman of the Jaylen Tyson fan club. I'm really high on the young fella, 21 years old, out of Cal by way of Texas Tech, by way of UT Austin. Jaylen Tyson, 6'7", 215-pound wing. I am not surprised because, again, I feel like it might just be me and a few others, and that's fine, that he did not get a green room invite. However, I don't understand why more people aren't high on him. His last year at Cal, increased usage role from, I believe, 20% to 30%. So, increased usage role, he shot 30%, 36% on catch and shoot. He shot 38% unguarded. 36% on dribble jumpers, and he was at 57% at the rim. So again, this was a Cal program that was basically like, this is your first year head coach, Mark Madsen. Shout out Mad Dog. First year college programs, especially like rebuilding ones, it's tough. You get guys and you try to piece something together. Jaylen Tyson made the most of his opportunity in that bigger role, and he delivered, and he got to show you more of what he could do. He was more of a spot up guy at Texas Tech, limited minutes his freshman year at Texas. So my soapbox or thing that I'm sticking to is that I don't necessarily think that while Dalton Connect, this is not me hating. I'm gonna hate later, but this is not me hating on Dalton Connect. I like Dalton Connect, right? He should be plug and play. 23 years old. He's a good athlete, very good shooter. And he seized the moment and made that jump from Northern Colorado to Tennessee, took Tennessee very far, best player on the team. Like, this is not slander to him. He shot 42% on catch and shoot. He shot 47% unguarded, and he probably really wasn't unguarded very much because he was the focal point. And he shot 31% on dribble jumpers, and he was 59% at the rim. Absolutely take those numbers. I wouldn't drop him to past 14. Like, he's ready to go, especially for teams like Sacramento who need somebody who can play right away.
That's what I talked on the Kings podcast. They asked me about all sorts of players, and I said, I wouldn't pass up Jaylen Tyson. Like, the guy's more complete than Tristan Da Silva, who is like the plug and play guy.
Right.
If you were to take away one player from each Pac-12 team, and the other teams were like, oh, which player do we want to take away from this team? The last person in the Pac-12 that could be afforded to be lost was Jaylen Tyson. He did everything for Cal. I've had him top 20 since January because what does he do well? He scores. He's a pretty good athlete. He's more of a functional athlete than a twitchy one, is the way I put it. He's more of a glider than an explosive guy. He shoots it well on the ball or off. He shot 42% in one of his years previously. Then he shot 39% with the ball in his hands. Improved as a passer, ran pick and roll, does a lot of things. He and Connect are in a similar spot for me. I know you said you were saving for some hate, but he's a guy that I would be pretty stunned if he's not picked before both Deron Holmes and Kyle Filipowski, neither of whom I think are particularly great, but he's clearly ahead, along with Tyler Smith, Baylor Shireman, and all the guys on here except for maybe Terrence Shannon Jr. I feel pretty confident that I would take above those two I listed, and maybe a few more. But he's a snub in the sense of, okay, if you really watch basketball, he's going to impact the game positively. And even though his numbers don't pop out at you athletically, he makes the right plays and he's not a bad athlete.
Yeah, and it's not, you don't have to be Anthony Edwards to be a very good athlete in the NBA. Like, he is rock solid, a big dude at 6'7", and he's strong. And, before we move on to Terrence Shannon Jr., like at Tech, when you said, all right, when he was figuring out and he was a role player, he shot 42% on catch and shoot, and he shot 45% unguarded. So, like, he can shoot the ball. But I feel like I think if he is not the scorer that he was at Cal, he can definitely stand in the corner and shoot. But it helped out that he can do more. Like I said, I have him in the lottery, and I'm going to keep him in the lottery because, again, I just feel like he does so many things well, and I think he's really being underrated. The last guy we're going to talk about before I start the hate train, Terrence Shannon Jr. Him not being in the he has the production, right? He has the talent. It's definitely not an age thing, because we got older guys too. Him not getting a green room invitation doesn't surprise me, just because of everything that happened to him during the season, with the case that he, was exonerated from. But, like, again, you can argue that he should be in a first round pick. He could be like how you had mentioned with Christian Brown, like a productive guy who's ready to go and fill a role for a team who needs depth on the wing, and also who has like salary cap issues. We talked about Terrence Shannon Jr. Anything else you want to add to that?
The one concern I have about him is how real is his shot, because he has a track record of more years than not shooting it poorly. I thought most of his best shooting games came as a rhythm shooter after he'd established getting to the rim in fast breaks, and then he put the ball on the deck. They gave him space because they were scared of his speed and shot it. That's not going to be a shot diet at the NBA. So I don't really trust his shot, which is why I have a little less faith in it, in saying he's been snubbed. But I do think he's more talented than some of the guys that are ahead of him, especially in the green room. I talked about two already that I think aren't necessarily that great. Shannon has more talent. The concern for him is, just for me at least, on him is just his shot. Because if he doesn't shoot well, he is a good defender. He does have positional size, but he's not enormous. But if he doesn't shoot well in the NBA, there's not as much, like, even though it's played faster, there's not as much run and gun as he did. There's very few like one-on-one run-outs. You try to beat the defense by yourself like he did. So that takes away an extreme element that was one of his biggest strengths.
Yeah, the game is faster, but like in the transition opportunities aren't like they are in college, right? Because we're not sending three to the glass in the NBA. We got to get back, because guys are just too good. It's funny. I watch an old, if you watch an old, like, if you're a historian, but if you watch an old Bulls Lakers game from the finals, like Jordan and Pippen were flying down the court on every rebound. And I'm like, yes, those guys are great athletes, but they would not be defended. You would not send that many guys to the glass in today's NBA, because guys are just too athletic. So to wrap up this podcast, and this is light hate. Kendrick Lamar did this thing on this concert, and it was basically a hate fest. And I don't hate the young man, but I gotta hate somebody. Johnny Furphy getting a green room invitation is a really big surprise to me. A lot of it to do with the aforementioned guys there, but like, he had 11 good games, if you really want to drill it down, right? He had 11 great games. So again, I'm not hating on him. It's just, he didn't invite himself. But if you look at it, 11 starts, he averaged 13, and this was after, I believe, McCullough went down. Yep. 13 points, 7 rebounds, 1 assist, and like a steal and a half. He shot 41% from 3. That is amazing. He basically had no buzz and took 11 starts, and he created the ultimate buzz. But he was not able to sustain that. And his last 8 games, he averaged 9.5 points. The rebounding did not drop off. Again, I'm buying him as an athletic transition guy, rebounds, and I'm still buying the shooting, but he shot 25% from 3 over his last 8 games. And I mentioned it before. If we're going to trash a Justin Edwards for getting off to a slow start and then picking it up, but you see he's a second round pick by all accounts. How or why are we not doing the same thing with Johnny Furphy, who basically turned 11 great games, don't get me wrong, 11 great games into a green room invite, first round buzz, and he didn't really measure as well as you would want him to. I know he does rebound, but I think he was like 6'8" with a 6'9" wingspan. Thoughts on Furphy? Am I wrong, or please tell me how you feel about Furphy?
I think that's all valid. I actually have him 24, so by 24 invites, I'm okay with him getting invited.
Mm-hmm.
The way I would phrase it is Furphy has upside because you saw what they were able to tap into that upside.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was thrust into a role that he wasn't ready for. He was a more raw prospect. He's 18 as opposed to Justin Edwards being 21.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference there for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think you saw what his role could be, and then he got even enlarged because McCullough was constantly battling things. So then his role shifted when McCullough came back. Then it came back. Then he went back into the limelight as having to need to score the ball, and his name got moved up scouting reports for other teams in the Big 12, which is a very defensively oriented league. I saw Furphy in person twice play at March Madness in Salt Lake, and he's big and really fluid. He's 6'9" and really slides his feet. And so he moves as if he's 6'5" at 6'9", and that's a compliment. He doesn't know how to use his height yet, but he moves so gracefully that I think defensively a lot of his ineptitude is because he hasn't played much. And then with a narrow frame, a skinny body, he was able to throw his body in there and get rebounds, and the shot looks good. So I actually do like Furphy. I don't think his longevity of production warrants a green room invite, but I do think potential. And there's been people with far less track record of success, more than 11 games, who've gotten green room invites before. So I don't have too much of a bone to pick with him.
Yeah, it's not personal. Again, I've had Furphy probably as high as 15 at one point. He did cool off. It's just I know exactly what I'm expecting from him, but will I get that at the next level? I mean, obviously we don't know, but that's just kind of my biggest question. And if this is about, I guess if it's making it personal, I don't feel like he warranted he didn't have and it's not always about production, but his production wasn't Tyler Smith's production, right? And we know that we can hope that Furphy at 6'9", the jump shot translate, but at the same time 6'11" jump shot should translate too. So I guess if we said, to make the long story less long, if we're going to sit here and say, well, these guys have potential to have it received a green room invite, who do we replace? He would be my guy that we replace. But again, I have him as probably a late first round pick regardless. So I'm not sitting here saying that Furphy is going to be a bust. It's just that when you drill down to it, and that's what this part of the draft process is, it's okay, we're looking for something. He turned 11 games into potentially being a top 20 pick. I'm not mad at the young man, but that's just kind of where I am with it. So we are going to conclude, but again, I really appreciate you, Leif, for coming on. But before we go, let me tell you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, so that concludes our show. I am James. That's my guy, Leif. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you again.